There's a moment that happens to almost everyone over 60, and most people never even notice it. You stand up from a chair a little slower than you used to. You grab the railing on the stairs just in case. You tell yourself it's nothing, just getting older. But here's what almost nobody tells you. What's actually happening inside your body has a name. It's been studied for decades, and by the time you notice it in the mirror, it's already been progressing for years. It's called sarcopenia. Stay with me, because this is one of the quietest, most underestimated threats to independence in people over 60. It doesn't announce itself. There's no single day where you wake up and know something changed. It creeps in, decade after decade. And society has trained us to shrug it off as just aging. According to the Cleveland Clinic, sarcopenia is officially defined as a progressive and generalized loss of skeletal muscle mass, strength, and function that occurs with aging. Not fat, not skin, muscle. The very tissue that lets you carry groceries, get off the floor, catch yourself when you trip. This process doesn't start at 60. It starts decades earlier, quietly working in the background. Stick with me, because I'm going to walk you through what's happening inside your muscles right now, and what the research actually says works. This channel exists to help people your age stay strong and independent. But I want to be upfront. Everything here is educational. Before changing your diet, exercise routine, or anything related to a health condition or medication, talk to your doctor first. They know your body and your history. Think of this video as a conversation starter, not the final word. Now let's get into what's really going on. Most people assume muscle loss is something that just happens after 65, like flipping a switch. That's not accurate. Research shows the decline actually begins around age 30. From that point on, most adults lose somewhere between 3 and 5% of their muscle mass every single decade. Every decade, starting in your 30s. By the time most people reach their 60s, that loss has already been compounding silently for 30 years. And here's where it gets more serious. That slow, steady decline doesn't stay slow forever. Multiple studies show the rate of loss tends to accelerate between the ages of 65 and 80. The same process that crept along quietly for decades suddenly moves faster, right around the years when people most need their strength and balance. How common is this really? According to research using the European consensus criteria on sarcopenia, somewhere between 5 and 13% of adults between 60 and 70 already meet the clinical definition. That number climbs to somewhere between 11 and 50% of adults over 80, depending on the study. In the oldest group, it's not a small minority. In some studies, it's closer to half. But this ends up not being the most disturbing part yet. What's happening isn't just fewer muscle fibers. It's something more specific. And once you understand it, you'll never look at getting older the same way again. Researchers who study this describe two things happening at once. First, the number of muscle fibers themselves decreases. Second, the fibers that remain actually shrink. It's not one or the other, it's both, compounding together. And there's a nerve component to this too. Over time, the motor neurons that signal your muscles to contract gradually decline in number, which leaves some muscle fibers essentially cut off from the signal that tells them to fire. A muscle fiber with no signal doesn't stay useful. It weakens, and eventually it's lost. Here's a way to picture it. Imagine a factory floor with 100 machines. At first, a few machines shut down here and there, barely noticed, production barely changes. But over the decades, more machines go quiet, and the ones still running start losing power too. Nobody flips a single switch and shuts the whole floor down. It's death by 1,000 small cuts, and that's exactly why nobody notices it happening to their own body. Now picture someone in their late 60s. Say she used to garden for hours without thinking twice. Lately, she notices herself needing to sit down halfway through weeding a flower bed. She assumes it's her age, maybe her knees. But according to what the research on this actually shows, what's likely happening is that the muscles in her legs and hips have quietly lost both fibers and strength over years. And gardening now demands more from a smaller, weaker pool of muscle than it used to. This is the part almost nobody tells people over 60. It's not that you're simply wearing out. Your body isn't a car with a fixed number of miles. It's an active, ongoing process, and the research is clear that certain things speed it up dramatically while other things can slow it down. That distinction matters more than almost anything else in this video, because it means you have more influence over this than you've been led to believe. But here's the detail that changes everything. Muscle loss doesn't necessarily make you look smaller. That's the trap. Most people picture sarcopenia as someone becoming visibly frail and thin. But according to researchers at Tufts University, as muscle is lost, it's often replaced by fat and fibrous tissue, so the muscle that remains ends up looking marbled, similar to marbled steak, instead of simply disappearing. Which means someone can be losing real strength for years while their weight on the scale barely moves or even goes up. There's one more thing that makes this more urgent than most people realize, and it has nothing to do with vanity or how you look. It has to do with what happens the day you fall. Falls are not a random accident that happens to unlucky people. According to researcher Roger Fielding at Tufts University, muscle loss is one of the primary reasons behind falls in older adults, and falls remain the leading cause of accidental death in people over 65. Balance isn't just about your inner ear or your eyesight. It depends heavily on fast, reliable muscle response. When you start to trip, your leg muscles need to react in a fraction of a second to catch you. If those muscles have lost fibers, lost strength, lost that quick responsiveness, the catch simply doesn't happen the way it used to. What used to be a stumble you'd laugh off becomes a fall. And a fall in your 70s or 80s carries risks that a fall in your 30s never did. Fielding also points out something people rarely connect to muscle loss. Falls don't just cause physical injury. They often lead to social isolation. Someone falls once, gets scared, and starts avoiding the activities that used to keep them strong and connected to other people, which painfully accelerates the very muscle loss that caused the fall in the first place. It becomes a cycle that feeds itself, quietly, in the background of someone's daily life. So when people ask what's really at stake with sarcopenia, the honest answer isn't about looking younger or fitting into old clothes. It's about whether you're still climbing your own front steps in 10 years. It's about whether a bad afternoon on an icy sidewalk turns into a bruise or turns into something far more serious. Now let's talk about what actually speeds this whole process up, because this is where most people are unknowingly making things worse, often with the best intentions. Physical inactivity is one of the strongest accelerators researchers have identified, and the speed at which this happens might genuinely surprise you. Studies looking at bed rest in older adults have found measurable muscle loss within just days of reduced activity. Days, not months, not years. This is a big part of why hospitalization can be so dangerous for older adults. Someone goes in for one problem, spends a week resting in a bed, and comes out measurably weaker. But here's the part where this story actually takes a turn, because everything up to this point might sound discouraging. What comes next isn't. Here's the part that changes everything you just heard. Sarcopenia is not a locked-in sentence. According to research on aging muscle, the body remains adaptable well into your 70s and 80s, and the two interventions with the strongest evidence behind them are exactly the two factors we just talked about being risk multipliers used in reverse: resistance training and adequate protein intake. Muscles responding to resistance the same way they always have at any age. Even people in their 80s have shown meaningful improvements in muscle function after starting consistent resistance training combined with proper nutrition. The body doesn't lose its ability to adapt. I want to be clear about something important here. I'm not a doctor, and this video isn't meant to replace one. Before starting any new exercise program or changing your diet significantly, talk to your doctor first. Your doctor can tell you what's appropriate for your specific situation. Let's go back to that woman gardening, the one we talked about earlier who kept needing to sit down halfway through weeding her flower bed. That's stage 1. Confused but paying attention. Say she mentions it to her doctor at a routine visit. That's stage 2. Understanding what's actually happening. Now say she starts simple resistance exercises a couple of times a week, guided by someone who knows how to adjust for her joints. Slightly more protein spread across her meals. That's stage 3. Applying what she's learned consistently. Here's what the research suggests happens next. Over weeks and months of consistent training, older adults commonly regain meaningful function. The gardening starts to feel manageable again. That's stage 4. The transformation, a return to confidence in her own body. Here's the piece that ties this to everything else about your health as you age. Sarcopenia rarely shows up alone. It's frequently connected to broader patterns of frailty, and it tends to cluster alongside other chronic conditions, including diabetes and heart disease. One study looking at adults over 60 found that nearly half were at risk of possible sarcopenia, and about 2 out of 5 showed signs of frailty overall, with women affected somewhat more than men. Elevated blood pressure was linked to more functional decline in that same research. This is exactly why a holistic approach matters so much more than chasing a single fix. It's about consistent movement, adequate protein, and regular conversations with your doctor about how your body is actually functioning day to day, not just what your blood work says on paper. There's a misconception worth clearing up before we finish, because it trips up a lot of well-meaning people. Walking is good for you. Nobody's arguing against it. But walking alone, according to the research on sarcopenia specifically, is generally not enough to meaningfully rebuild lost muscle strength. Walking is primarily cardiovascular. It keeps your heart and lungs working well, and that matters enormously. But muscles need a different kind of demand to grow stronger, specifically resistance, meaning your muscles pushing or pulling against something harder than their current capacity. That's why the research consistently points to resistance training as the key piece, not as a replacement for walking, but as an addition to it. This doesn't have to mean a gym membership or heavy barbells. Resistance can come from body weight exercises, resistance bands, light hand weights, or supervised equipment at a physical therapy office. What matters is that the muscle is being asked to work harder than it's used to, in a way that's appropriate and safe. Another myth worth addressing directly: protein doesn't need to come from expensive powders or supplements. It can come from eggs, fish, poultry, beans, yogurt, and other everyday foods. Food spread thoughtfully across your meals throughout the day, rather than concentrated in just one meal. Many older adults unintentionally eat most of their daily protein at dinner and very little at breakfast, which research suggests may be less effective for muscle maintenance. So here's where I want to leave you, because everything we've covered tonight comes down to one simple truth. This process has been running quietly in the background of your life since your 30s. Nobody warned you. Nobody sat you down and explained what was actually happening every time you felt a little more tired, climbing the same stairs you've climbed for 20 years. That silence is exactly what makes sarcopenia so dangerous. Not because it's unstoppable, but because it's invisible until someone decides to look for it. You now know something most people your age don't. You know that muscle loss isn't just cosmetic. It's connected directly to falls, to independence, to whether you're climbing your own front steps a decade from now without a second thought. You know the two things that matter most. Movement against resistance and adequate protein aren't complicated or expensive. And you know that the body, even in your 70s and 80s, hasn't lost its ability to respond and adapt. Here's the honest part. If you close this video and do nothing different tomorrow, nothing changes. The quiet decline keeps running in the background exactly like it has for years. And in another decade you'll be exactly where the statistics say you'll be. Not because it was inevitable, but because nobody, including you, decided to interrupt it. That's the uncomfortable truth sitting underneath everything we talked today. But if you take even one thing from this video, let it be this. Mention this to your doctor at your next visit. Ask specifically about your muscle strength, not just your weight or your blood pressure. Ask whether a referral to physical therapy or a supervised strength program makes sense for you. Ask about your protein intake relative to your age and activity level. That single conversation could be the moment stage 1 turns into stage 2, the moment confusion turns into a plan. Before you go, I want to say this clearly, one more time, because it matters more than any hook or any statistic in this video. This content is for educational purposes only and is not medical advice. Please consult your doctor before making changes to your diet or routine. Everything you heard today comes from published research and information from sources like the Cleveland Clinic and Tufts University. Use this video as the reason to start that conversation, not as a replacement for it. This channel exists for one reason: to help people over 60 stay strong, mobile, and genuinely independent for as many years as possible. Not through fear, not through shortcuts, but through real, verifiable information you can actually act on. If that mission means something to you, subscribing helps more than you'd think, because it means you'll keep getting videos like this one instead of stumbling onto them by accident. I'd genuinely love to know what stuck with you most. Was it the marbled steak detail, the connection between muscle loss and falls, or the fact that this whole process quietly starts in your 30s? Drop a comment and tell me. And if there's someone in your life over 60, a parent, a spouse, a friend, who needs to hear exactly this, share this video with them today. Not next week. Today. Because the earlier someone understands what's actually happening, the more time they have to do something about it. That's not a sales pitch. That's just true. Take care of the muscle you have left. It's doing more for your independence than you've probably ever given it credit for. I'll see you in the next one.